So hello everybody, we're going to be working on a project called Beyond Borders. A friend of mine and I were talking over this project for many months and basically wanted to kind of get a project that we could help people around the world with, and then also just pretty much a fun project that would help people look for work, volunteers, and kind of see what's going on globally outside of where they live. I happen to live in the Pacific Northwest and wanted to find projects basically outside of just the Pacific Northwest and try to help people out. So we want to look at a couple different maps today. I'm going to load these up with GIMP. If you're not familiar with this GIMP software, it's pretty cool. It's kind of an open source tool to draw diagrams out on and stuff like that. So we're going to basically start by looking at the population centers here of the planet. So this is a NASA worldview diagram showing just about all the population of the planet. It's kind of hard to get it all in one screen, so you have to zoom in a little bit. But this will basically give you an idea of some of the projects that we're going to try to do with this Beyond Borders project. So I'm just going to circle the main regions so you can kind of get an idea. So basically we're going to divide Asia up into kind of two halves, and then even get maybe even more specific. We're going to basically talk about the Far East, China specifically, and then India specifically. And then we'll definitely look into Europe. Europe we're going to kind of take into sections here, so we're going to probably look at most of Europe like this, and then basically maybe Northern Europe and some other things. And then Africa, we're going to kind of take that into two different main chunks. And I'm going to actually split off Madagascar from this. But basically we're going to do Sub-Saharan Africa and then Northern Africa. And then take that. And then with South America, kind of a similar thing. There's basically going to be this side of South America, the Brazilian side, and then mostly down to here. So that's going to be split. The Caribbean will basically be a separate little topic here, and then Central America will be one separate topic here, and then we'll definitely do East Coast kind of work, and then we'll do West Coast work as a possibility here. And then out in Asia, we're going to be basically looking at all of Southeast Asia as one big chunk, and then we might do Japan and Korea as one separate chunk here. So and then we'll actually try to do Russia. I think would be a good idea to do that. And then maybe up here in Northern Europe. And then Australia, of course, down here. And we'll probably take New Zealand in with that as well. So this kind of gives you a general population perspective of what we're trying to do. I'll save that map and then upload that so that everyone can kind of take a look at it. And there's going to be a lot of different maps on this whole project that we're going to be doing. Most of these come from a website that I'm working on here. Let me see if I can get that. Where is it? So basically I have a web link here, just Asher C. Martin, WordPress.com/maps. And under here I have basically a few hundred different maps that we're going to look at that will help us kind of decide about quite a lot of things in terms of what's going on with the economy, jobs, and different things in the area. So I hope that will help you out understanding what's going on. But this is another population map, and I like this one because it's got more details as you zoom in. I think for today we're probably going to look at either Europe or maybe Asia, Southeast Asia, or possibly even the Caribbean. So I think we might even start with the Caribbean because that's close to America and kind of exotic. Caribbean and Central America, and go from there. But if you have some suggestions, you can put that into chat, and I should be able to see those in the chat window. Let me just double check on that to make sure. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so I think the best way would be maybe we can use WhatsApp as a comment tool to send a message, or Facebook Messenger, or LinkedIn Messenger, and you can use one of those three to contact me during the conversation, and I'll hopefully just get back to you right away and we can have that discussion. But I wanted to show you this map just because it shows you so much detail. Let's zoom in on the Caribbean to see what's going on. The whole concept of Beyond Borders is to really think about stuff beyond where you're actually from. So if you're from the Central America or the Caribbean, you want to be thinking about how to work with South America or North America, or even Central America, or swap it between Central America and the Caribbean. So, and this kind of, the nice part about this is that as you zoom in, you can get even more detail on each of these islands, and it gets really detailed with the population. So this is one of the most detailed ones on the planet in terms of mapping, so it's really helpful to see that. Okay, so next we're going to try to look at the Harvard Atlas of Economic Complexity. And this one is really helpful because it will give us some ideas of like what kinds of work we need to be thinking about as we study the globe. So definitely there's going to be a lot of business services. You can see that that's actually the biggest chunk here, $3.46 trillion. And then transportation is also huge. And then you can see electronics is probably electrical manufacturing, and all that is probably number 2. So let's put that in a diagram just so we can see what's going on with that. I'll load that up in GIMP here, and we can basically highlight this. So basically this is the number 1 area that we want to look at, right? And then the number 2 area is probably going to be electronics. And then number 3 is probably going to be minerals and fuels, so like gas stations and things like that. And then number 4 would probably be industrial machinery, so that'd be like cars and vehicles, and we can even put this vehicles in here. I'll put it as number 5, but it's going to be 4 or 5. And I'll put another 4 here, -4 or 5. And then we're going to probably look at transportation, tourism, and some other things like down in here. So that would be 6, right? And then 7 here. And then basically all these other areas. So you can see insurance is actually probably a close number 8. So we might want to look at travel insurance and some other ideas. And then medical equipment is actually number 9. I'm going to highlight that one. And then all of these, we're going to look at this as big chunks. So this will be like food, and this is all plastics, materials, and this is all big areas. So that we'll kind of look at. This is furniture and some other things like that, and precious metals and stuff. So we're going to go through each one of these areas for each of the areas that we look at, and I think this will be helpful as we look at other areas for the Beyond Borders project. And let me give you the website overview so you can kind of see what's going on with the website. What we originally started to do here with the Beyond Borders. So basically we made up a website. We wanted to have a live meeting. We were going to put this on Jitsi, and what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'll try to load that up right now and see if we can actually handle both the live meeting, and I'll load in here. So this is like, you'd click on this link and then log in. You can do it with Google login. I think I understand. And then I think my camera should be off on this one, but it should work for the microphone. Yeah, the camera's not going to work. So basically, if you wanted to log in and see what's going on with that, you can have the Beyond Borders link there, and it's just Beyond Borders talk.wordpress.com. And then the live meeting, you click on the live meeting link, and then this will tell you what we're trying to do. So essentially we're trying to do an Asia meeting, an Africa meeting, and a Europe meeting, and then basically all that connected with the Americas. So whether you're in North America or South America, you're kind of in the same time zone, but these others are in different time zones. So it makes it a little bit difficult. So we're trying to get different friends, so friends that I have on Facebook, or friends that I have basically different, this is also public on LinkedIn, so you can contact me via LinkedIn, and then you can basically take a look at this. So this is the link up here, just beyondborderstalk.wordpress.com live. And I think I should be able to hear you if you just log in directly to the Jitsi link. So if you click on the Jitsi link here, that should do that. And then if you want to add this to your calendar for like a weekly meeting, we can click on here. I do that. So basically, once you log in, then we have basically our weekly discussion format. So we'll maybe introduce each other, have a featured topic. We're going to basically be looking at different topics around the world. So that would be basically one of these two main areas. So we're going to each week we're going to pick an area that we focus on. So it'll be an area in here, and then we basically go through and study all the different things. We'll talk about business services, and then electronics, and then we're going to go through minerals and fuels, vehicles, industrial equipment, transportation, and different areas within this map. And you can see basically we probably should take a look at some of these other ones as higher order. Just because they're broken into different segments doesn't mean that they're not that important. It's just we should definitely take a look at food, and we're definitely going to look at different like plastics, materials, and things like that. So and then you can see that different parts of the earth have different different amounts of. So basically you have North America and South America in this blue area, and you have Asia here. Asia and the Americas are very similar in terms of the whole size of the economy. The whole total of the economy is about $30 trillion. So you're talking about any number above that would be, kind of beyond what we're talking about. But basically we're going to break it down into the Americas, and then you have Africa actually being a very small part. But we're still going to look at these probably 4 regions or 5 regions as our main areas. And then I have a little funny thing. We really want to try to look at the wildlife and try to see how we can help out the planet as much as possible. So a lot of the project you'll notice in here is going to be about basically having people help out with the environment and help out in their communities around the world. So we're hoping that, I have some friends in West Africa, I have some friends in South America, I have some friends basically in Europe, and we want to kind of get together, talk about what's going on, have a discussion together, and see how to potentially work together on different projects and kind of discuss what's going on internationally. So and then I can see basically who's online here, basically on my Facebook as well as on the LinkedIn. So if you want, you can be sure to message me there. Or like I said, if you want to actually be live on the discussion, you can go to the Beyond Borders Jitsi link here, and that will show up right live, and you can basically get in on the conversation that way. So there's quite a number of things that we wanted to look at. This is all the regions, so you can kind of see what time zone, because everyone is, like when it's nighttime here, it's daytime on the other side of the earth, and vice versa. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. That's why we had primarily 3 different time zones that we wanted to work with. So kind of we're going to try to work with that. So let's go back and study start to look at what we wanted to look at for this particular discussion to get us started. I'm going to pause this and see if we have any questions, and give me 1 second. I'll be right back. So, one thing that really surprised me when I first started studying the planet Earth is basically 2 things. First, it seemed incredibly difficult to understand everything. And then as I spent a year and then many years actually studying the planet, I started to understand some things that were pretty detailed about each region on the planet, and started to see that as I start to get more practically involved with some of these things, I realize that there's actually quite a lot of distance just on an airplane flight to get somewhere else. So the first thing that I'd recommend for anyone working on this Beyond Borders project, let's say you live in India or China or Africa or Europe or South America or North America, is look at your neighbors carefully. So basically, if you're in Africa, you're kind of lucky because you're in the same time zone as Europe. So Africa and Europe are actually very much related here. And let me draw some diagrams here so you can kind of see what I would recommend for this Beyond Borders collaborations. And I'll load up this image again. Oops, sorry about that. Let's load up the wrong one. Sorry about that. So what I basically mean is that your collaboration zone is very important, right? So basically, we're going to put those in green, and I'll put them in, maybe in blue is a little bit easier to see. So you basically have some natural areas that you should definitely consider first, right? So basically in North America, you should definitely consider the East versus West, concept. So like if I'm on the West Coast, I should definitely consider working with people here on the East Coast. And likewise, these guys here should definitely consider working with each other here. And then here, there's definitely a consideration here. So, and this is before you start talking about, actually further beyond even your local border. So this is basically local borders, thinking about people in your next town. Like where I live, there's 2 towns that live right next to each other. So it makes it very easy because there's one university in our town and then another university in the next town. So it's pretty easy to collaborate. Now in Africa, it's a little bit more complicated because the distance is so vast. And actually it becomes a West Africa and East Africa kind of thing. So you basically have East Africa, West Africa, and then you actually even have another split between North Africa and South Africa. So you go here and here, and then even further in Europe, it makes it a little bit weird because who should Europeans work with? So the problem is that as you get far out to Russia, it really makes sense to work with Russia and work with the Middle East, but the income is just so vastly different. So the amount of money that you make, on the East Coast versus West Coast, is relatively the same. It's relatively the same in Central America, South America, and Africa. But in Europe, you could have a 3 times income gap or more. But when you go north or south, this is pretty similar. So the big question is how to work with Africa here. So that means a big jump between prices of what you're talking about and working with. And I think I forgot to circle the Middle East. Let me circle the Middle East. So I'll be saving all these images so you can take another look later on. And then the discussion here is actually pretty interesting, right? So surprisingly, you'd think that that India and China would work more directly with each other, but it's not as simple as that. Actually, what's been going on is China has been working more and more with Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. So this line really goes like this typically, and I'm going to actually even do that in a different color because maybe we should put that in a different color. I'll put that in green. So this has been kind of historically what's been going on, is that basically most of the population is up here around Shanghai and Beijing, and it's basically been working with the South, and also with Korea and some other places like that. And then there's a really interesting kind of thing here because basically most of the population of Australia is on the East Coast. So basically that means you basically have kind of a switch between here, Bali almost, and Sydney. So that's kind of a weird way to look at it, but it's basically kind of there's a big gap, which basically, and there's not much population here on Papua New Guinea, and then even within North Korea and South, I'm gonna just do a little line here so you can see. So the real question is the Middle East, right? So I left that as the most complicated one because it's basically splitting here. So this is pretty common actually to have some relationship between basically the far eastern Europe and the Middle East. So there's actually a lot of Russian, like for example, Muslims and things like that. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, so keep thinking about who you want to work with as we talk about this, because there's basically so many places around the world. We're going to try to focus on Central America and also the Caribbean today. But you can see how this gets a little bit weird because, again, like you have in Europe, the population is so centered around like Amsterdam, and then the wealth gap is huge between Africa and Europe. And the same thing you have here, you start to have this big wealth gap between like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. So, but basically that goes like this. So really what you can see is there's not a whole lot of population in the north here because it gets so cold. This gets into Siberia, and it's really, that population is mostly within, the working people are primarily within this region here. So anyway, I'm going to save this and pause for a moment. Okay, so as we look at where the money is primarily around the world, we're basically going to discover a lot of that is in America and a lot of that is in China. And then outside of that, you basically have kind of a mix. It's Northern Europe basically has a lot of wealth in here, right? And then you have some wealth down here in Brazil. And then you have quite a lot in the Middle East, but it's kind of suddenly starts to change, as well as down here in Africa, South Africa. And then we should never forget about Australia, but basically Australia has a lot of wealth as well. So we're going to look at that, and then you have Japan and Korea off to the side here. But this is the overall picture, and then you start to get into even kind of different systems even in Southeast Asia, right? And you can see that even is in the Caribbean here, right? And then you basically have Africa. And there's really a difference because actually North Africa should be split. So I really should draw this line primarily with South Africa through there. And then actually Russia's pretty wealthy all throughout it, so relatively speaking. Okay, so let's go back to this map and see like what you'd like to do. So basically, as we look at this whole map, we're trying to figure out basically who we want to work with, right? And the first question that I had is that, so like, if you are in India, you basically have some choices, right? You can work with Asia, Far East, or even the Southeast Asia, or even Australia, and you got Africa, and then the Middle East, and then to some extent you have Europe. So, but basically on the so when we talk about beyond borders, the most difficult beyond border question is basically between one side of the earth and the other. So, like as we try to work with America and South America and Asia, that becomes the most complex problem because it's like day and night. So, like you're basically talking about 9 a.m. Is basically 9 p.m. over here, and 9 a.m. over here is 9 p.m. over here. So it's basically a hard beyond borders question. So that's why we're gonna try to look at different time zones. Right now is actually okay for Africa. So we're gonna try to do on the weekends. We're gonna try to talk mainly with Europe and Africa, and then at the nighttime around 9 p.m. we're gonna have a separate discussion and then talk to people in Asia. So I see some people online right here, mainly from the United States. Then also I see a couple people from Africa, and then a couple people mainly from India that are actually up pretty late right now. So, and they might not even be in India. That's just maybe where they're from originally. Maybe they're in Europe or somewhere else. But basically, one of the things when I first started working on this, I wanted to actually work down here with Brazil. So I wanted to have some connections down in Brazil and make some friends here. But that's actually quite a long flight. That could be a 17-hour flight between here and here. I might have to go get my dog. Give me 1 second. He's really kind of funny and stuff, but he might want to do some other things for a little while. So that's all I'm going to be able to do for right now. I'm going to come back maybe in about 20 or 30 minutes and just continue the discussion where we left off. But take a look at some of these maps. I'll post them to the link on Facebook as well as LinkedIn, and then we can take a look and discuss some more details. Thanks so much.